Beer 1. I'm Jeff Swanson. This is Paul Bedell and Dion Kerr. We're here to talk today a little bit and catch up with Dion. He released his, what would this be, your fifth?
I guess it's probably, fourth or fifth major thing, I guess.
We're here talking about Ivy. Came out in September, and here 4 months later, we're still celebrating the release and wanted to catch up and talk a little bit about the record with Dion. So I guess maybe you could just tell everybody maybe some thoughts about like the project's conception and like maybe where it started.
Well, a lot of this music started way before I had the idea of making this album in the first place. My music making, sometimes I pull things out from the past. I always like save audio files and voice memos. Some of this music dates back to like 2016 or 17 even. So I guess the process started back then making all these audio files. I guess I started making Ivy itself about a year and a half ago with a whole nother concept before the pandemic hit. And then that kind of led me to another direction after that.
Maybe you could talk a little bit more about that, like how the pandemic changed that course.
Yeah, I mean, initially I had all this music that I was sitting on and just didn't really know how I wanted to release it yet. It was a lot of larger ensemble stuff. So I'd been working on it for a number of years, doing things piece by piece. And I still was kind of imagining what's the vision I wanted to put together for this music. But once the pandemic hit, I kind of realized that I'm not able to really do these sorts of collaborations and be in person with other artists. So that kind of shifted it to be, self-sufficient thing where I'm recording everything, tracking all the instruments myself, drums, bass, and guitars I just made here. And so that kind of shifted to just be, this one room type of project where I just like stayed in here and created everything from this garage.
A question coming from that is, when you had the idea or the concept of involving some guest artists, did that originate from the original conception of the idea, or kind of as an offshoot from, oh, we're in a pandemic and we're not having in-person sessions, I'm going to get like Adam O'Farrell to play on it, or Jeff Parker? Was that something always in the back of your mind to feature other people, or did being in the pandemic, did that just make sense for you to go in that direction?
Yeah, that definitely came later on because I didn't really think of that when I was initially writing the music. So it was definitely an afterthought. Once I had talked with y'all about releasing some music together on your label, that's when I started even like putting the idea together. Oh, maybe I should include some guests. And with the artists I ended up choosing, the types of artists I was already kind of like referencing in a way. When I was making these tracks, I would imagine someone like a Jeff Parker or an Adam O'Farrell, hearing them play this music. Like if I were to ever perform it live or something, that's the sounds I was already hearing. So it was pretty natural for me to just want to include them when it came time to asking some guests to appear on the record.
I remember you saying once you met Jeff at the Banff program in Canada. Maybe you talk a little bit about like your experience with that, and like how the other artists like Adam, how you met him, and maybe provide some background on those artists and why you chose them.
Yeah, Jeff I had crossed paths with at the Banff, and that was just an amazing experience overall. It's led by VJ Iyer, and Jeff was one of the artists in residence for the time when I was there. That was the first time I've actually seen him performing live, hearing him talk about his music, the way he composes and even just improvises in person. That just made a huge impact on me. I had already been like a huge fan of all of his music. Even more recently, his latest albums I've been listening to a lot. So I was listening to his albums that he recently dropped, made me think of him, and I just thought to reach out through email since we had crossed paths, and just he was happy to play on it. Really stoked to have him on that track Cosmos, which was the second single I think we dropped.
Which also has a video as well. Kind of like other non-musical things that you have interest in, like making videos. Is that something new that's come about with maybe more free time in these days, or is that something that you've always been doing and interested in?
I guess, yeah, I've gone through phases, but it's kind of something I've always been experimenting with on and off. And even just coming from like a pretty heavy visual arts scene growing up, I even saw myself as a visual artist in a way before I even took music super seriously. And I definitely like the correlations of all those worlds and how they can kind of fit together. So at any time I'm making music, I always have a visual thing in my head, or vice versa. If I'm making something visual, I can hear music that I'm composing to that. I go through phases of maybe one kind of being more predominant in my life, where I'll just be doing tons of music stuff and being hired to play with a bunch of bands and playing gigs if I won't really have time to focus on other stuff. So this pandemic has kind of led me back into do more video, which I've kind of taken a hiatus from in previous years. So it was nice to come back to that and just kind of create whole pieces where I can do music and video and visuals all together. And that's part of the concept of the record.
And you've lived kind of a few different places in the past probably decade. Has like been being back in Florida kind of affected any of that video work that you've been doing recently?
Definitely, pretty much all the video stuff for this record was exclusively shot in Florida. Was always drawn to being out in nature, even growing up in South Florida. So I went back to a lot of those places that left an imprint on me when I was growing up, and just started filming video. I actually didn't really know what I was going to do with all this video until I started making this music. And then the music I was writing was about moments like that in nature, even certain feelings you get being out of these places. And so I would start filming and then taking like stems from a audio track and just kind of piecing them back together, back and forth in that kind of way. But I also lived in New York City, and that's where I met Adam O'Farrell. And we got to play a bunch together. But living in New York also influenced some of my writing, because a lot of the big band stuff I had made when I was up there, Adam and I had played in a bunch of different settings, and we never got to document anything that we had played together. So that's why I thought of him, because I loved all the moments we had shared on the stage. Creatively and sonically, I really vibe with him. So he was someone who I always wanted to hit up to do something.
Can you maybe talk about how you had Bobby Lewis on the, like, featured him on the record?
I'm a huge fan. Like, he's like one of my favorite.
Yeah, he's incredible. I was
bass players.
Yeah,
just his whole body of work. He's just a really inspiring person too. He's always giving, positive vibes and
yeah, he's a positive
encouragement. Yeah. And just, when I was making that track, when I was listening to these chord changes and I saw Bobby Lewis at my feet, I was just like, wow, Bobby Lewis would sound like incredible on these changes. Come to find out, like a couple days after that, he posted something saying, doing bass tracks for anyone, just DM me. Like, he had a special, he was just recording bass for anyone to hit him up and just to contact him. So I just like asked him, did it within a day and sent it back to me. And the first time I dropped the stems in and listened back, I was like, I almost cried. It was so good. Like, when I just heard this bass solo over the song, it was like literally perfect. Like what I imagined, he like surpassed everything. It was just a dream to work with him, because he's such an incredible artist. And that solo, I was just like, this is it. This is like now made this track complete.
Yeah, that track along with the video you made, I think I really love that, how they meshed together. It really takes you on a journey.
Are you still making music in the pandemic? And maybe you could talk a little bit about like how releasing an album in the pandemic maybe differs from what a normal release would look like. There was probably obviously no release show. Maybe you could just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it definitely was like, a hurdle at first, just wondering what to do with music making, just kind of sitting, waiting to see what's going to happen, not being able to get people together. But that's definitely how this album ended up as like pretty much a studio record, and just allowed me to explore more of the recording and producing elements and mixing as well. One day decided I'm just going to mix this and just, do this all myself, having started this music already, going into this and then wanting to just finish it. It's unfortunate we're not able to play a show, because I would have loved to assemble the band and hopefully one day still be able to do that. But it's led to other cool interactions, just even like doing this and finding other ways to still connect and communicate to other musicians, getting feedback. I feel like I've gotten more virtual reception off this album than I have with any other thing that I've done, because people still want to connect and be inspired and inspiring other people as well.
But I think it's a good point that you bring up. You connect with people in different ways that maybe on a normal release you would kind of not put as much effort into, or just not have time to spend on. Maybe in the future we'll be able to find that balance of like all these great things that we're able to do now. When you were working on these arranging projects, like you said, you had a big band project. Were you able to continue any of that while you were in New York?
I always liked composing for bigger arrangements, like and ensembles. My other album, Reptile Ground, features a 9-piece band. It's like super difficult to keep any larger ensemble together, or even for a one-time sake.
Yeah.
So anytime that I'm able to get a big group of musicians together, I just record everything. Even if it's a bad take, I'll still find something in there I can use, because that sound is something you can't recreate by even multi-layering yourself. It's never the same. So
Right.
I definitely cherish those moments of having larger groups play music, and especially my original music. And I tend to just always, like, even if it's on my phone, I record everything, try to use that stuff. But one day I would love to be able to perform some of this music with those same amount of people, but it's pretty few and far between that I've actually been able to make that happen. And generally when I'm playing music for my records, it's usually a condensed version.
One thing that I like too about your approach and composing and stuff in general is the repurposing of material, like you're saying, through the big band, and having this material and then creating something new from an idea that had been, years before.
Looking forward now, the music is out and everybody should go get it. But what can we maybe look forward from Dion Kerr coming soon or soonish?
I'm always dropping little bits here and there. So
Yeah.
I have a couple more projects that's been ongoing. So I'll probably still release little things here and there. I have another instrumental tape that I'm currently working on. Yeah, maybe some remixes. I have the record with the Smoogies that just got released last fall, and we're starting to play more again now that things are opening back up. So we'll be playing. We're doing a second record with the Smoogies in February. The end of next month, we're tracking a second album. And then I've the released with Seafoam Walls, which is a band I play guitar in. We're releasing our debut full-length album. I have my hands in a ton of projects right now, and I'm also appearing as a bassist with a bunch of other records. Just other stuff that I've just played bass on for other artists is coming out this year. So there's definitely a ton of stuff that should be on the lookout.
And maybe you could tell everyone where to go keep track of all these different projects. Is there a website or somewhere we can link to?
All streaming services under Dion Kerr, you can find most of my records. I have a website, dionkerr.tumblr.com, and then dionkerr.bandcamp.com. You can find all my music, and on my Tumblr, you can see some of the other projects I've been a part of, including one of Paul's records. And then I have a YouTube page. Yeah, you can usually find like all that stuff linked through one of those. You'll see all my projects.
Very cool. Well, Dion, thanks for hanging out and catching up and talking to us about Ivy and all the stuff you're up to. Appreciate
Well,
it.
thank you.